You want to make sure that you practice spiritual fitness every day, that you're a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person, that you've said everything you need to say to your loved ones, that they know that you love them, and that you and Jesus have a strong relationship, because you may need it and may not have time to get it. And hopefully that leads you to be a better person and not get in these kind of fights to begin with. So of course, the first thing we got to talk about here is we got to talk about being a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person. Not getting into these kind of fights, again, not getting into these kind of stalking situations where there's orders of protection and those kinds of things. I do think, again, avoiding these is your best bet, but sometimes you can't, and this guy is stalking or whatever the case is. It still means at all times you have to be a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person. Here is that he got his ego invested. Hey, dude, don't touch me. And now he's going to just be upset with him and yell at him and push him off. And I don't recommend that here, because that escalated it from a gentle physical contact to a physical contact of aggression. And that's pretty significant. And I really don't recommend that here. I think that was what angered this other guy to the point where he's going to escalate it to deadly force in a moment. And this kick right here is nothing but ego. This was mad at the guy for touching him, and now he's going to kick that. And I'm just going to tell you, as a self-defender, you always have to keep your ego in check. One of the biggest things we learn in self-defense is you cannot defend your ego, and you cannot have these kind of monkey games, because you might run into a crazy person and a person who wants to escalate from a verbal altercation or even a physical altercation to a deadly one, and that's exactly what we see happen here. And I want to keep you out of those, so you've got to learn death to ego as a self-defender. And then finally, with this guy here falling on his face, we got to talk about spiritual fitness. You got to make sure that every single day you've said everything that you need to say to your loved ones, and that you have said everything that you need to say to Jesus, that you and he have a strong relationship, so that if it is the last day of your life, you're ready for it to be so. Because unfortunately, when that day comes, you won't have any extra time to cover your ass. Because he's going to get in it with this guy and see some things coming here. And then after he's aware that there's a problem, you got to learn to de-escalate, escape, and evade, friends. I can't tell you enough. I don't even know if you knew what this guy had on him, but that's completely irrelevant. You got to de-escalate, escape, and evade confrontation. And having the phone to his head is one thing, but pointing at the guy, making angry gestures and those kinds of things is never going to de-escalate a situation. So learning the art of verbal judo, learning how to get away from encounters before they happen, so that you don't get into optional fights with people, especially people that have sharp objects on them, is incredibly important. But the biggest thing we learn here is death to ego, maintaining your space, verbal judo. Don't get in these kinds of problems. And if, God forbid, something does happen to you like this, maintain your distance so that you don't get stabbed. And again, I'm not saying that the guy in the red pants was a good dude. I think he probably wasn't a good dude. I think there's evidence there that maybe he was a pretty significant dirtbag. But bottom line is, you have to be the good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person and not chase. He didn't chase this second time. I think that was the right decision. Finally, I do think we should practice spiritual fitness every day. And spiritual fitness in the beginning of this, in the first part, means as a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person, that we don't get into fights like this, that we don't stalk and harass people, that we only have consensual relationships. Then also it means that we say everything we need to say to our loved ones every day, and we make sure that our relationship with Jesus is strong, which should hopefully keep us from these kinds of incidents rather than get us to the place where we end up meeting him on that day. Let's practice that as part of making sure that we cover our ass. And also the guy on the right-hand side, I don't think that this guy made it. In fact, I don't know if either one of them did. So we talk about spiritual fitness and active self-protection all the time as well, because we want to say that, you got to be right with your loved ones, have said everything you need to say, be right with God, because you don't know the day that you're going to meet him. We talk about spiritual fitness and active self-protection fairly regularly. This guy certainly didn't wake up this day thinking that it would be his last. So you want to make sure that you've said what you needed to say to your family, because this one is over right here, and this man loses his life in this. And you also want to make sure that you're at peace with God, because you don't know the day that you're going to meet him